Bitcoin price is falling a little bit, going down now to $95,000, $94,500 or so. But more importantly is why is the price going down, right? A lot of people are scared right now. A lot of people are quite concerned with everything that's going in Bitcoin. However, there's no reason to be alarmed. Everybody is wrong when it comes to Bitcoin right now, and Bitcoin price is probably going a lot higher than you think. So in today's video, I'm going to run through at least half a dozen different major pieces of news right now that are, in my opinion, going to be affecting the Bitcoin price in the foreseeable future. Mostly obvious, very bullish catalyst, right? But first, we have to talk about why everybody is wrong. There's been this big piece of news when it comes to quantum computers and this new chip called Willow. And we're going to talk about what are the actual threats for Bitcoin when it comes to quantum computers and what are actually not major threats when it comes to computers, right? Or quantum computers. Most people actually, in my opinion, are really, really wrong when it comes to this. A lot of people are saying quantum computers are zero threat to Bitcoin, and actually, I would say they are wrong. Okay, I did a few polls a couple months ago asking basic questions of Bitcoiners of their understanding of quantum computers' threat to Bitcoin, and 85% of the respondents to those polls I posted on my Twitter page, on my X page, got that wrong. So in today's video, we're going to talk about what the Bitcoiners get wrong about quantum computers, and we're also going to talk about the absurdity that is the vast majority of fear, uncertainty, and doubt when it comes to fear with Bitcoin and quantum computers. So we're going to go over that entire topic. What is true? What is not true? What do people get right? And what do they get embarrassingly wrong when it comes to these questions of quantum computers? We're going to talk about the Microsoft as well as Amazon companies voting on Bitcoin for their balance sheets. What is going on there? We're going to talk about Ray Dalio, what he gets right and what he gets wrong about Bitcoin as well as gold. We're going to cover some other bigger picture topics like Michael Saylor achieving a 2% stack of the Bitcoin network. And we're going to talk about what this means for the long-term future. Eric Trump, earlier today, at the time of recording, was saying that Bitcoin is going to go to $1 million a coin. Why is he saying that? And what does that mean, most importantly, when it comes to nation state adoption? Like apparently Russia and other countries, at least 4 different countries, looking to adopt Bitcoin. So without a further ado, let's get into all these pieces of news. This is truly what a bull market feels like, is when everyone's excited, there's so much news, and it feels like that it just can't get better, and yet it keeps getting better. So, big question. What does everyone get wrong, and why is Bitcoin going to $1 million? So first of all, quantum computers. What does everyone get wrong with quantum computers? So if you haven't heard of it yet, there is a new chip out there called Willow, a new state-of-the-art quantum computing chip with a breakthrough that can reduce errors exponentially as we scale up using more qubits, cracking a 30-year challenge in the field. In the benchmark test, Willow solved a standard computation in 5 minutes that would have taken a leading traditional supercomputer over 10 to the 25th years, which is septillions of years, right? So a lot of people don't really know what a quantum computer is, and I'm definitely not going to give a full in-depth explanation now for the sake of time. But long story short, traditional computers use electrons to create bits, right? You have a 0 or 1 depending on the position of electron. However, we've been making smaller and smaller computer chips for decades, right? You've probably heard of Moore's law, right? Every couple of years, we essentially double the amount of computing power we're able to have. But there is a finite limit to where we're able to get this down to, right? And we're pretty much rapidly approaching that limit where we can't make computer chips much smaller, much more efficient, because now we're actually talking on the atomic or subatomic level to where we can't just build much smaller. But a quantum computer is able to, in a very narrow set range, is able to be significantly more efficient than a traditional computer, right? So this is a legitimate announcement. This is something that actually did come out. This is something that Google's been working on, Willow. And this person over here commented, Geiger Capital, well, Bitcoin is dead. Fun while it lasted. All your passwords too. Basically implying that this quantum computing chip is going to hack Bitcoin. And we'll get to that community note in just a moment. Now, Geiger was making this as a joke, obviously, but 4.3 million people saw this post and 25,000 of them liked it. So I'm assuming there's at least tens of thousands of people that actually believe that this is going to hack Bitcoin or kill Bitcoin or whatever. So let's talk about why that's just wrong. That's just not true at all. So as this community notes has, which is correct, I verified this on my own, but cracking's Bitcoin encryption require millions of error-corrected qubits. Willow only has 105, okay? And post-quantum algorithms will likely be integrated into Bitcoin's protocol before quantum computers pose a legitimate threat. Both of these things are entirely true. Yes, this quantum computing chip is tremendous and it's amazing and it's ridiculous, However, it is off by what is needed to quote unquote hack Bitcoin by numerous orders of magnitude, literally off by a factor of at least 10,000. Okay, so now the other thing to keep in mind is that if we were to have a sudden explosion in quantum computer where actually there was a chip that was able to hack Bitcoin that was just announced to the world, the reality is that you're probably going to be dead pretty soon. Because the reality is that quantum computing would not only hack Bitcoin, our favorite little magic internet digital money, but it also would hack everything else in the world. All of your bank accounts, all of your stock accounts, right? Nuclear launch codes, everything would be hacked, everything would be destroyed. Basically, the entire idea of encrypting anything with computers, keeping anything private, that's all gone. So if someone ever comes out and says we have a quantum computing chip, it's gonna destroy Bitcoin or whatever, you can basically not believe it, because as soon as you hear that, then you can take a reasonable bet that some terrorist has hacked some nuke and is going to nuke the world or whatever, right? So my point is that this is the kind of thing that, for it to be significant enough to destroy Bitcoin, it's going to go through everything else first. And so really, there's no point being afraid whenever you see a piece of news like this, right? Yesterday, a lot of people were concerned about, does this mean Bitcoin's actually dead? No, it absolutely doesn't. In fact, there are Bitcoin improvement proposals, right? BIPs out there already with quantum resistant soft forks that would be integrated with Bitcoin. Now, there's an important note to keep in mind here, which I'll get to in just a second. But here's another chart of explaining the nuance with the situation here. So obviously, you've probably heard of SHA-256, which is a hashing algorithm for Bitcoin for the proof of work system. You also have ECDSA, which is also 256-bit. And both of these is nowhere close, or are significantly farther ahead than what this quantum computing chip released yesterday are going to be able to do, right? So as this person over here summarizes it, the short answer is no, this is not a threat to Bitcoin. Neither of the important cryptography algorithms for Bitcoin are significant or important. And I don't think I pulled it up here, but there is actually a risk. Okay, and this is what I'm going to get hate in the comments for, but it's true. Okay, 85% of the people I polled on this a couple of months ago on Twitter got this wrong, but it's not an opinion, it's a fact. So let me talk about how quantum computers are a threat to Bitcoins. They're not a threat to Bitcoin, the network. They are a threat to individual Bitcoins. So the reason why quantum computers are a threat to those kinds of Bitcoins are that if you have Bitcoin that has been lost, if you burn, quote unquote, burn Bitcoin, if you have Bitcoin that's just sitting out there in ether, held in wallets or held with keys that are not quantum resistant, there will be a point in time, at some point far in the future, where quantum computers do become developed enough that Bitcoin does migrate, either with the soft fork or hard fork, probably soft fork, to quantum resistant technology. All those Bitcoins that have been left in the former world and the former set, all of those are going to be discovered. So let's say you lose a Bitcoin, you actually haven't lost it forever, right? This is a common misunderstanding, an oversimplification people have. They say, oh, wow, Bitcoin's so bullish. 4 million Bitcoin have been lost. 5 million Bitcoin have been lost, or whatever. Actually, that's not true. And it's why I try to avoid saying that, because it's just simply not true. If somebody is saying that 4 million Bitcoin have been lost forever, no, not really. They've been lost forever to you. They've been lost forever to the previous holders. But it's very likely that in some point in the future, somebody with a sufficiently powerful quantum computer is going to discover the key, is going to discover the seed words for that Bitcoin that has been lost to history, right? It is very likely, assuming Satoshi Nakamoto is dead, that Satoshi's coins are going to hit the market someday. Granted, it's probably going to be some major nation state or some major corporation that is using a major quantum computer to basically beat everyone else at discovering those coins. But this is the reality of it. And you may not like that. You may think that's an opinion. That's not an opinion. That's just how cryptography works, right? If you lose the old Bitcoin and you don't have the keys, you can't move the keys, how on earth are you supposed to move it to a quantum resistant wallet? And so therefore, somebody with a quantum computer is probably going to find that. And it's almost certainly not going to be you. So if you lose your Bitcoin keys, you haven't really donated it to the network per se. Really, what you've probably done is you've donated it to a major corporation or nation state just a couple decades too early. So that is a really important distinction to note, and it's one, unfortunately, a lot of people in Bitcoin don't pay enough attention to. Okay, that is a significant amount of Bitcoin out there. Okay, in my opinion, I think this is literally one of the only ways at which nation states are going to be able to stack multiple millions of numbers of Bitcoin. Why on earth would you buy Bitcoin off spot price in the long-term future when Bitcoin's tens of millions of dollars, when instead you could just develop a faster quantum computer? You get a national strategic military advantage by having a better quantum computer. And also, you might get the benefit of getting some old Bitcoin wallet with 10,000 coins, 50,000 coins, a million coins, right? You might find Satoshi's coins, right? Which effectively pay for the whole endeavor in of itself, right? So my point is that there are millions of Bitcoin out there that are very likely, in my opinion, to be found someday at some point by quantum computers, and that is the only threat to Bitcoin. The worst case scenario would be a temporary price dump, right? Let's say 20 or 30 years from now, somebody discovers 10,000 coins, a million coins, 100,000 coins, or whatever via a quantum computer and some old, legacy lost wallet or whatever. The worst case scenario would be a temporary dip in Bitcoin's price, much like how we're seeing a temporary dip in today's Bitcoin price. But the point is that is the only real major threat to Bitcoin with quantum computers. The only other scenario, which is basically Bitcoin's hacked, it goes to zero, and quantum computers take over the world, that kind of scenario would also equate the end of the internet and of computers as we know it. You would have much bigger problems than your little magic internet money dying. So hopefully that's enough of a summary of what's going on with quantum computers here. Basically, what everybody gets wrong, the 25,000 people that liked this picture get wrong, is that no, quantum computers are not a threat to the Bitcoin network. They just aren't. However, they are a threat at the long-term future for maybe short-term price swings for Bitcoin as new Bitcoins flood the market after they're discovered. Because keep in mind, in 20 or 30 years, the block reward is going to be less than a Bitcoin. If somebody magically finds 10,000 Bitcoin, that's 10,000 blocks just dumped on the market, right? So in the I always talk about how we have less in common with the near future and the past. This is one way at which Bitcoin itself has less in common with its near future than the past. There'll be a greater financial incentive in a couple decades, well, technically already now, but there will be a greater financial incentive for somebody to discover Bitcoin with quantum computers than to mine it with typical mining corporations, right? Obviously, most people still mine because it's a more dependable business model, but the point is that that is the only threat to Bitcoin in the long term, which again is not a threat to the Bitcoin network. So the vast majority of the Bitcoiners, at least 85% of the Bitcoiners that say quantum computing is zero threat to Bitcoin, like technically they're right about the network, but most of them that are saying that are missing this point with the price action, theoretically in the future. And then of course, everyone that's saying it's a threat to the network are just dead wrong. So I think we've covered that point sufficiently. Now let's progress away from the quantum computer topic and let's go to those that will have the quantum computers, the mega corporations and the nation states. So as you have probably heard, Microsoft has voted today on whether to accept or deny Bitcoin added to their balance sheet. Of course, they voted just how you would have expected. They denied it. However, we have a Bitcoin treasury assessment being proposed for a different mega corporation here in America, that of Amazon. Amazon has $585 billion in total assets, 88 billion of which is in cash. Okay, now the first thing to keep in mind here is that even if Amazon voted to have half of their treasury in Bitcoin, they would still have significant difficulty catching up to Michael Saylor, because Michael Saylor's current cost averages are in the 50s, 60s, now approaching $80,000 since Bitcoin price is so much higher. Even if one of these mega corporations like Microsoft or Amazon were to take a significant double-digit allocation to Bitcoin in their personal treasury, they would still have difficulty catching up to Michael Saylor. That is how far ahead of the curve he has been, right? So it's still a big deal for Bitcoin, though, if they were to pass this and if they were to take some significant percentage allocation of Bitcoin. We're still talking about billions, if not tens of billions of dollars chasing Bitcoin. So shareholders of Amazon, okay, now this is not coming from the headquarters of Amazon, right? That's probably really important to note, right? This is shareholders writing Amazon. This is not actually Amazon itself. So in my opinion, it's very unlikely that Amazon is actually going to pass this, right? In the similar way that Microsoft shut it down, I think Amazon's almost certainly going to shut it down. But the conversation is being had. Shareholders are requesting the board of Amazon to conduct an assessment to determine if adding Bitcoin to the company's treasury is the best term, long-term interest of shareholders. Now, obviously, if they're thinking this through, they would come to the conclusion, yes. I don't think they're going to come to that conclusion, though. However, it should be noted that Michael Saylor has met multiple times with Jeff Bezos privately off camera on Jeff's yacht, right? So that should probably be mentioned, that Michael Saylor and Jeff Bezos have a relationship that's gone back a while. Michael hasn't given any detail as to what those conversations have had for obvious reasons. The private conversations. Actually, one time I was with him in person, somebody kept asking him repeatedly what those conversations with Bezos was like, and Michael got quite irritated because, I'm not sharing a private conversation, blah blah blah. Anyway, a funny little side story. But the point is, Jeff and Michael have been talking. Shareholders are writing Amazon to think about this. Maybe Amazon will figure it out. Maybe they won't. They probably won't. But the conversation is being had, and we're talking about multi-deca-billion-dollar treasuries here. And if one company is going to do it, it's more likely that a different company is going to do it, right? If Microsoft were to have actually adopted Bitcoin, like some people were hoping they were, then it would have been more likely that Amazon's going to do this. So the bad news with this is that this means Bitcoin price probably isn't going to go quite as high as soon as you'd like. But the good news with this is that you have more time to be buying Bitcoin. You have more time to be front running these institutions. People ask if they're too late to Bitcoin. Oh, it's $100,000 a coin. Am I too late? You're still front running Amazon. You're still front running Microsoft. You are front running so many of these billionaires. Okay, there are 3,000 billionaires on the planet. Okay, you are front running at least 2/3 of them, right? The best case for these billionaires is that 1/3 of them have actually bought a significant amount of Bitcoin. There are 2,000 billionaires. You are front running when you buy Bitcoin at 100 grand. You are front running Microsoft. You are front running Amazon. You are front running Facebook. You are front running 9 of the 10 largest companies in the United States of America when you buy Bitcoin at 100 grand. Bitcoin is not expensive at $100,000. It's very, very cheap. Now, somebody else, not someone that works in one of these major corporations, but a hedge fund manager, someone that I, respect a lot of what he says, Ray Dalio. Surely you've heard of him. Ray Dalio has a Bridgewater, right, one of the most successful hedge fund managers in the entire world, has described why it is better to invest in gold and Bitcoin right now than debt assets. And I think he is very correct here, right? Ray Dalio obviously has a lot of strong opinions when it comes to the economy, when it comes to the world in general. I think he's, in general, been proven right more often than not. And as Ray Dalio says, he believes that there would be a pending debt money problem. I fully agree with him, right? Now, he was talking mostly about gold and Bitcoin together, right? Obviously, people compare Bitcoin as digital gold, so, they compare to each other pretty well. But yeah, I fully agree with Ray that it is impossible for these countries, meaning the United States and others, to not have a debt crisis in the years ahead that will lead to a great decline of monetary value. I fully agree with that, and I think that's really important. It doesn't matter if Amazon and Microsoft had already bought Bitcoin. You don't have a choice. Okay, these debt crises that are coming to these nations are going to significantly erode the purchasing power of the dollar, of the euro, of the won, of the yen, or whatever, right? It's like, yes, you were early to Bitcoin. That's the optimist way to put it, is that Bitcoin has built-in redundancies to protect itself against future threats like quantum computing. Bitcoin has the built-in opportunity that is you get to front run all the billionaires, most of the corporations, and most of the countries, but also there was this asset protection side of things. And I think that is really where Bitcoin price starts to ramp up, right? When people start smash buying Bitcoin at $500,000 a coin, not because they're in Bitcoin to get rich quick or they want to take profits when it doubles or triples, but when they're getting into Bitcoin at 500 grand because they're terrified of the decline of purchasing power of the fiat currency, that I think is when this whole game theory really starts to accelerate, when this thing really starts to go, right? Price action can be very volatile to the upside and fluctuate with people's fear and greed, fear and greed, fear and greed. But when there was such a monumentous amount of fear in the traditional legacy system from these debt instruments declining in value, all that fear combined from that fiat system in decline is going to dramatically outpace by orders of magnitude all the greed you could possibly fear from the upside of Bitcoin, right? And I think that is going to be where these hedge funds, where these corporations, where these other entities take that multi-digit percentage allocation, right? Microsoft and Amazon, or your local pastor, or your friend's business that he has, or your mom, or whomever in your life that you think should buy Bitcoin, they're probably not going to be buying Bitcoin because somebody is telling them, oh, look at how rich you can get. They're going to probably start buying Bitcoin when someone says, hey, Amazon, you've got $88 billion of cash on your balance sheet. We can project with reasonable certainty that the United States dollar is going to lose at least 5% of its purchasing power in the next couple of years. If you have 5% of $88 billion, that is $4.4 billion that Amazon, the corporation, is going to lose in the next couple of years. That is a massive detriment to shareholders. It's a massive detriment to the stock price, and therefore it's a massive detriment to your payouts as somebody managing Amazon, right? And so my point is, this point with Ray Dalio, I'm interjecting in the middle of this video here, I think is really crucial, is that yes, you're early to Bitcoin at $100,000 because Amazon, Microsoft, these other companies have it bought, but you're especially early because most of them aren't going to start buying until they realize what Ray Dalio said here, which is that you're not going to want to hold these debt-based instruments like cash. And so your only option essentially is Bitcoin. You're probably not going to have gold for a wide variety of reasons, but even that is not going to be a bad option. I think a lot of companies and individuals will allocate to gold. I've been saying repeatedly that I think gold is actually very cheap in terms of dollars, but I think obviously more and more people are going to be trending to Bitcoin instead of gold. And obviously the one that is trending to Bitcoin unanimously is the one and the only Michael Saylor. I've already brought him up a couple times in today's video, but congratulations to Michael. If you're watching, almost certainly not though, but non-zero chance, I suppose. Michael Saylor, as of yesterday, has had his company MicroStrategy surpass the 2% mark for Bitcoin. They have achieved a 69% year-to-date yield and hold over 420,000 Bitcoin. Nice meme, Michael. Nice meme. 69,420. Anyway, now they own technically 423,650 Bitcoin. They have acquired it for approximately $25.6 billion. Of course, the Bitcoin now is worth significantly more than that, given that, a lot of these purchases were at a significantly lower price. And their average price per Bitcoin is about $60,324 per Bitcoin, meaning that they are up well over 50 or 60% on their Bitcoin purchases. So congrats to Michael. Of course, this 420,000 Bitcoin mark is 2% of the total Bitcoin supply. Now, a lot of people are saying that this is an existential threat for Bitcoin because, let me see, am I still recording here? Dang it. Am I still recording? Okay. For some reason, it said I wasn't recording. Anyway, a lot of people are saying this 2% mark for Michael Saylor is an existential threat because, oh, that's a big amount of centralization. I actually agree with that. I think that is a potential threat. Obviously, Michael doesn't have any larger of a share of the Bitcoin network's voting power. He's not able to influence the network's privacy or security just because he has a larger stake in the network, right? This is the problem with proof of stake networks. But that is a major threat of centralization. However, I think the nuance to that opinion is the reality that most of these people that are buying are people buying his convertible notes, are people buying his shares, right? So yes, Michael has hundreds of thousands of Bitcoin, and yes, that's a concern. But I think the reality is that really those Bitcoin are distributed among thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of shareholders and convertible net holders, right? So the reality is that yes, you may not like the fact that Michael is the guy at the helm controlling these 400,000 Bitcoin, but the reality is that if he wasn't going to offer these convertible notes to these insurance companies or to these bondholders or these investors or hedge fund managers or whomever, like somebody else was going to do it. And so I would rather Michael be in charge of being the captain of that ship than somebody else randomly, right? So yes, it is probably a perceived problem that Michael has all these Bitcoin. However, in the long term, all the Bitcoin are going to be centralized, right? And this is something we'll get to later in the video, but not everybody's going to have UTXOs. Not everybody is going to own layer one Bitcoin. Okay, you yourself watching this are probably going to be your own Bitcoin bank someday in the future, right? I'll get into more why in a moment, but like the vast majority of people, 99%, over 99% of the world's population is never going to be able to make a layer one base Bitcoin transaction. There are only 200 million transactions a year. There are 8 billion people in the world. Even if there are only 20 million entities making 10 transactions a year on the base chain network, that's 99.5% of the world that's never going to have base layer Bitcoin. So I think this is the beginning of an uncomfortable period for Bitcoiners when we realize that we're being really, really successful. And as a function of that success, we are pricing people out of owning layer one, right? You can't have digital Manhattan while also having everyone own land in digital Manhattan. At some point, as a function of the value of that land skyrocketing in price, you're going to have people have the necessity to build buildings atop of that land in the future, right? So maybe, yes, you can say it's a concern that Michael Saylor and via MicroStrategy has 2% of the total Bitcoin supply owned now. However, at the same time, you got to keep in mind that's owned by shareholders. You got to keep in mind this was inevitable anyway, and I would rather have Michael in charge of this than somebody else randomly that we don't really know that much about. Michael's been very transparent with his opinions, so we can hopefully at least predict that to a good bit. So again, congratulations, Michael, 2% of the total Bitcoin supply. I'm really wondering how quick it's going to take you to get to 3% here. Now, Speaking of Michael Saylor again, right now, at the time of recording, live, there is a conference going on in MENA right now, right? And over in the Middle East, right, there are pictures of sheiks walking around over there, right? Of course, the Middle East has gotten really interested, right? The Saudis are big with oil, and they have been de-dollarizing a good bit, diversifying away from the dollar. So this is a major nation state story. It's also the first conference to be over there, the first Bitcoin Magazine conference to be over there. So I think these are all very significant. Now, Donald Trump's son, Eric Trump, over there on stage was just saying that he is confident that Bitcoin is going to hit $1 million. And of course, this is a picture here of Michael Saylor's retweet of that speech, of that presentation by Donald Trump's son, Eric Trump, right? Now, a lot of people have said, oh, Donald Trump doesn't actually understand Bitcoin. Donald Trump's not an actual Bitcoiner, blah, blah, blah. I think, what I think most people miss is that it doesn't matter if Donald Trump is not a true Bitcoin believer himself. Like, his kids understand Bitcoin, right? Eric Trump understands Bitcoin. Don Jr. understands Bitcoin. Barron, to some degree, understands Bitcoin. Yes, they have their garbage, Liberty scam token, whatever things that they do, and that's kind of gross. I don't really like that. But they seem to understand Bitcoin to some degree. And if at some point in the next 5 years, they fully understand the national strategic importance of Bitcoin, what are the odds that they're going to try to tell their dad to adopt Bitcoin at the national strategic level, right? We've seen Donald Trump out there talking about how jokingly he wants to buy Greenland from Denmark, or jokingly how he wants to make Canada the 51st state of the United States. Why does he want to do that? Because Donald Trump has an ego, right? It's one of the reasons why he's resisted Bitcoin for so long. Donald Trump has an ego. He has a savior complex for America, right? You know, obviously he just won the election in a massive red sweep, you know, good on Donald Trump and everyone that voted for Trump. But the reality is that Donald Trump is a branding guy. Donald Trump's whole success is branding. He has branded himself into becoming the president of, you know, and basically dominating not just American, but global politics for over a decade now, right? And so or almost a decade, not quite over a decade. But my point is that Trump has this vision of being remembered forever for making America better, making it great again. We're going to make it great again, right? We're going to have Canada be the 51st state. We're going to buy Greenland, right? Drill, baby, drill, whatever, right? So my point is that Trump wants to have his memory and legacy stamped into America's history. And I think at some point in the next 5 years, maybe sooner, maybe later, but at some point, I think it's extremely likely that either his cabinet, right, with Elon Musk, Vivek, JD, others, are going to try to orange pill him. You know, Howard Lutnick is in that group too, or his family is going to try to orange pill. Like, somebody is going to get through to him at some point and say, Donald, you probably can't buy Canada. You probably can't buy Greenland. But what you can do is you can adopt a Bitcoin standard for the United States, right? In the same way that everybody remembers the Louisiana Purchase, everyone remembers Seward buying Alaska, everyone remembers the purchase of California, right? Everyone remembers and more, you know, immortalizes these and idolizes these presidents and figures that acquired land for the United States, because that is their legacy. And so I think that's why Trump jokingly talks about these things of buying Canada or Greenland or otherwise, right? Because he wants to be remembered for something significant that hopefully had America in a good direction. And I think when somebody, and so far, Trump has been resistant against Bitcoin because of an ego, because he doesn't understand it, because he's busy. I mean, obviously, you know, President of the United States, you know, you're pretty busy, right? As a major politician like himself, you're very busy. But when somebody gets through to him that, hey, Donald, this is it. This is how you stamp your ego, you stamp your branding, you stamp your legacy, you stamp that magical name, that magical golden plated name, Donald Trump, into America's history books with orange coin. This is how you do it. Donald, you're literally the meme. Your face is literally orange, right? You can be in the history books. When somebody gets that through to Donald, I think that's when he goes full bananas and just adopts Bitcoin like crazy. And so my point is that I think it's really important to not just keep in mind what is Donald Trump's understanding of Bitcoin, but the 10 to 30 people in his immediate surrounding, what is their understanding of Bitcoin? And the fact that Eric Trump will go out of his way to go to a Bitcoin conference in the Middle East, I think is something very telling. And something else I think it's important in telling too is that, like Eric Trump mentions in his speech, I encourage you to watch it, that he has known Michael Saylor for 20 years. This is full validation that Michael Saylor has access to the president's ear and the ideas he's been recently sharing around, you know, with them, right? And this is something from someone else that I think it's a really, really good point to be made. And we saw this with Robert Kennedy too. And Robert Kennedy At the last Bitcoin Magazine conference back in Nashville in July of 2024, he was mentioning a few names explicitly: Cynthia Lummis, Caitlin Long, Jason Lowry, and Michael Saylor, right? There was a very short list of Bitcoiners that, in Kennedy's eye, are the ones worth listening to, right? He nominated Michael Saylor being Treasury Secretary, right? So my point is that these are the people in Trump's immediate ear. Does that mean that Trump figures it out? No. Does that mean that we should assume everything Trump does is going to be in the best interest of Bitcoin? No, obviously not, right? Trump's going to go play with Bitcoin or whatever it is that we do, right? And so my point is that you shouldn't trust Trump, but you should understand that the odds of Trump actually legitimately adopting a nation state strategic reserve for Bitcoin, in my opinion, are rising by the week. They're rising by the month. And maybe there's still very low percentage odds, right? Maybe it's a 0.1% odds or 0.5% or 1% odds, but next month it's going to be 2%. That's going to be 4%. A year from now, it's going to be 10% odds, right? I think within the next 5 years, like, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if Trump adopts Bitcoin January of 2025 or in September of 2027, right? Like, if this happens within the next 5 years, you're going to be thrilled and grateful that you bought Bitcoin under $1 million a coin. Because do you really think America is going to buy 500,000 coins, 1 million coins, 3 million coins, 4 million coins, and the price isn't going to go any higher than it already has, right? Michael Saylor, over the course of 4 years, has acquired 400,000 Bitcoin at an average price of $60,000 a Bitcoin. What if the United States is acquiring 1 million coins at the average cost of $150,000 per Bitcoin, right? How many, bull markets, bear markets, this cycle happens because Bitcoin price gets high enough, people become willing sellers. But what happens if you have nation states guarantee buyers for the next few years? Like, how many sellers is that going to deter? There are always going to be sellers. There are always going to be bear markets. But how many of those sellers are going to say, I'm going to wait 2 years because the US is going to be buying another 2 years. I'll probably be able to borrow from this Bitcoin stack better in a couple of years. Like, even if just a third or a half or a tenth of the sellers that would sell at a certain price point are removed from the market, that means the price goes even higher, right? It's a self-fulfilling prophecy. So I think this is really, really important to keep in mind, is that Michael Saylor has the ear of Eric Trump. Eric Trump has the ear of Donald Trump. There are many people that have the ears of Donald Trump and this nation state game theory. I don't know when it's going to happen. I don't know how it's going to happen, but I do believe strongly that it is going to happen. And when it happens, it is going to scare sellers away. They're going to convert back into buyers, and it's going to be a massive global competition. Again, I think a lot of it, frankly, is ego, right? Donald Trump wants to be known as the guy that has a great relationship, the best relationship with Putin, with everyone, right? I'm a businessman, right? He wants to know as the guy that is the best at everything. He wants to be known as the most orange, the most tall, the most handsome, the most wonderful guy in the world, right? And so my point is that what happens if Russia were to adopt Bitcoin? Now, granted, this is not from Putin's mouth, but Putin himself has described how nobody can stop Bitcoin. Putin himself has described the possibility of Russia accepting Bitcoin in exchange for their oil reserves. And just a couple days ago, the Russian state deputy, I don't even know how to pronounce his name. Sorry to Russians watching. Proposed creating a strategic Bitcoin reserve. Okay, so that's something that was, again, a lot of these things are casually floated, right? This is not a guarantee that Amazon's going to adopt Bitcoin. This is not a guarantee Russia's going to adopt it. But my point is, the Overton window is shifting incredibly fast. If they are mentioning it, they're probably already thinking about it. If they say they're thinking about it, they're probably already committed. And if they're buying, like, they're not going to announce it ahead of time, right? And so the fact that it's being allowed to be floated by Putin himself, as well as people under Putin, like, that's something really, really to think about, okay? And I summarized this the best I could in a tweet I made yesterday, and I think probably it's the best summary I can give for here too of my thoughts when it comes to this. I think the odds of any one of these things individually is pretty low. I think the odds of Russia adopting a Bitcoin standard are pretty low. I think the odds of Amazon adopting it are pretty low, right? But if you take enough small chances and you combine them, you get a very significant chance that something is going to happen. And if something is going to happen, that only increases the odds of everything else happening, right? If America adopts a national strategic Bitcoin reserve, the odds of Russia doing the same, in my opinion, increase by a factor of 10. Do you really think Putin's going to sit by watching the United States stack 1 million Bitcoin? No, I don't think he's going to sit by. Maybe the odds are low for America doing it. Maybe the odds are low for Russia doing it. But if America does that, and we go from a 1 in 10 chance to a 1 in 1 chance, Well, the odds of Russia doing the same dramatically increase. And in fact, I think maybe increase by a factor of 10. Maybe we go from a 2% chance to a 20% chance we're going to do the same, right? Whatever you want to pick as the percentage odds, I think that those odds are going to increase by a factor of 10. Likewise, if Russia were to adopt a national strategic Bitcoin reserve, the odds of America doing the same increase by a factor of 10. Now let's talk about the one everyone forgets, China, because China doesn't talk about it because of the three countries, they're the most communistic, right? If America or Russia adopts a national strategic Bitcoin reserve at some point in the next 5 years, the odds of China doing the same increase by a factor of 10. The most people in the world in China, right? One of the most richest nations in the world, China, right? Way more money than Russia, right? Obviously, people pay attention to Russia because of the military, but China has way more money than Russia. Okay, now if America, Russia, or China were to adopt a national strategic Bitcoin reserve, the odds of at least 10 or a dozen other countries doing the same also increases by perhaps an order of magnitude or two, right? My question here is, do you understand what this means? This is game theory. Yes, the odds of America going out and smash buying 4 million Bitcoin are pretty low. Yes, the odds of Putin saying we're only taking Bitcoin for oil in the next couple of years are probably pretty low, right? Yes, the odds of Xi in China figuring out Bitcoin are pretty low, right? Them embracing it. But you combine three different small probabilities, combine that together with the hedge fund managers of the world increasingly adopting Bitcoin, with the major corporations of the world increasingly adopting Bitcoin. My point is that you combine all these small probabilities together and you get something that is really, really significant. And so just like how Ray Dalio was saying, you probably are not going to want to be owning these debt-based instrument assets, right? Because the indebtedness of these nations, US, China, Russia, all these countries are only increasing, right? People are only going in one direction, towards the Bitcoin direction, right? And so, likewise, if this begins to happen, we're going to see other countries do this. If other countries do this, it's going to be normal for everyone to do this, right? And so we can have this debate of which corporation is going to do it first, Apple or Amazon or Facebook or Microsoft. But it doesn't matter. If one of them does it, they're all going to do it. We can have this debate about, will Trump do it or Putin or France or Mexico? Who's going to do it first? But it doesn't matter. If somebody does it, and in my opinion, one of the big three, America, Russia, and China, if one of those three do it, all bets are off. And Bitcoin at 100 grand is not going to be perceived as expensive. It's going to be perceived as dirt cheap. You are front running China. You are front running Russia. You are front running America. You are front running 98% of America. Now, some people speculate that the Russians or other countries are already buying Bitcoin or mining Bitcoin. That is entirely possible. I personally don't think that's the case, but I guess I won't get into why because that's controversial enough, right? My big point here is none of this matters. Nothing I've said in this video matters. If any one thing I've said in this video matters, this is all squabble. This is all just nonsensical debate. If these things happen, you are going to want to have Bitcoin. You are going to want to get off zero. And in my opinion, this should excite you because Bitcoin price is going up. This should excite you because it's really bullish. This should excite you because it's cool and it's exciting, it's sexy. Everyone wants the number go up. Everyone wants to salivate at how rich they would be if Bitcoin price just kept going up. But we have to keep in mind, you don't get to have a 10x in wealth without a 10x in consequences, responsibility, and threats against your Bitcoin. Okay, right now, okay, just at the time of recording, we've gone down from 17 sats per VByte per virtual byte down to 8 sats per virtual byte. Bitcoins are dirt cheap. And likewise, block space is dirt cheap, okay? Look at this. Right now, we're talking single-digit sat per VBytes, okay? But if we go back to the halving block, where there was not enough space in the block to satisfy demand, if we go all the way back here to April of 2024, we see something really, really different. Okay, the median fee was 200 sats per VByte, literally 20 times higher than the current rate of fees. And in my opinion, that is going to be cheap in the far future. Okay, 200 sats per VByte, in my opinion, is going to be cheap in the far future. Now, this looks really expensive right now. Oh man, that was so expensive. But look at this, 18 bucks for base layer transaction. Okay, let me put this in context here. There are 330 million companies in the world. There are only 200 million transactions per base layer Bitcoin a year. That means that if you have 50 million of the world's companies making 6 transactions a year, you have overbought the number of transactions you can make. Really, only 4 transactions. If you have 50 million companies, barely 15%, 18% of the world's corporations, making one on-chain transactions per quarter. That's it. That's all of the Bitcoin transactions in the base layer, right? And if that were the case, how much are they going to be willing to pay, right? If you have the top 15, 20% of the world's companies making one transactions per quarter, how much are they going to be willing to pay to have that transaction on the base layer? I don't know what it is, but I can tell you this. It's more than $18. I can definitely tell you that, okay? So my point is, this block, which broke all kinds of records for being incredibly full, you have to understand you have less in common with the near future than the ancient past. Look, there was empty space in this block. Look at that empty space. You see that? Granted, the fees were really high for this block because there wasn't a lot of empty space, but let's go back to the very first halving block in Bitcoin's history. Let's go back over a decade, 12 years ago. What was the fee then? Oh, look at how empty that block was. Oh my goodness. People are going to be shocked looking back and being amazed. This is a halving block? This is a halving block? The first halving block from 2012? Really? The median fee was 387 sats per virtual byte, or 1 cent? It was only a penny? Keep in mind, today it's $18 for our most recent halving block. But my point is, if you are not taking the security of your Bitcoin seriously, I think you are dramatically underestimating how much change is in front of us. You own actual Bitcoin. You have the opportunity to own layer one physical, quote unquote, physical Bitcoin, right? My encouragement is take these things seriously because we don't know when the catalyst is going to come. We don't know how dramatically or how quickly the catalysts are going to come, but they are approaching rapidly, right? With quantum computers, everybody is wrong when it comes to that. The misunderstanding is dramatic. People know so little about Bitcoin, they still say it could be shut down by the government or that quantum computers are going to destroy it. Wrong, wrong, wrong. Even billionaires have been commenting on this incorrectly in recent days, right? Even though Microsoft denied Bitcoin and Amazon is speculating, this is going to happen. Saylor just hit 2%, and he is radically and dramatically approaching 3% as fast as possible. Russia is approaching. America is approaching. China, you can be sure of it, is also keeping their eyes and keeping their tabs on what's going on here. This is game theory. This is the innings up to game theory. We are probably no longer talking in terms of years. We are talking in terms of months until all of this stuff is going to start manifesting and just start going and going and going. And it is probably never going to stop. It will probably slow down with future bear markets. But to think that Bitcoin is going to be under $200,000 3 years from now, which is the traditional 4-year halving cycle, right? If you believe the traditional 4-year halving cycle, that means we're going to have about $200,000 Bitcoin in 4 years, 3 or 4 years. I just am having a really hard time buying that. Maybe that's what happens. Maybe I'm proven wrong. But I really think with all that's going on, the odds of that are falling by the week. They're falling by the day. Your main fear, your main excitement should be Bitcoin price going up, but also you should have a healthy dose of fear. If you are spending 20 hours a week fantasizing about how rich you're going to be when Bitcoin price goes up, and you're not spending even 20 minutes thinking about the potential attack vectors against your Bitcoin in any given week, in my opinion, you are not being realistic or responsible with the Bitcoin you have. You don't get to be so early like the Bitcoin halving block in 2012, when Bitcoin was a couple dozen dollars, right? You don't get to be fortunate enough to be in that first halving block with so much empty space and be able to just skip all of the threats coming against you over the next decade or so. So let's talk about realistically what you should be thinking about here. Your number one risk is the custody risk, right? My strong encouragement, what is your annual rate of risk when it comes to Bitcoin? I personally believe for most people watching this video, it's over 2%. Some of you, it's 3%. Others of you, it's 5%, meaning that in the same way that I was talking about the nations before, there's a very small chance, maybe a 2% chance Russia adopts Bitcoin, maybe a 2% chance America adopts Bitcoin, 2% chance China adopts Bitcoin, right? You can take a dozen different small risks and say, oh, it's never going to happen. But you combine all those risks and you realize, oh my gosh, something is going to happen. And whatever it is, it's going to result in nation state FOMO. It's the same thing when it comes to your Bitcoin self-custody. You can say, oh, the odds of this are low, the odds of that are low, that. And so I'm just going to ignore these things and assume nothing bad is going to happen because the odds are so low. But combine all those risks together, and all of a sudden you have something that is going to take your Bitcoin. I don't know how you're going to lose your Bitcoin, but I do know that for probably 90% of the people watching this video, you're going to lose at least 10%, 20%, 30%, 40%, maybe even all of your Bitcoin in the next 10 years or so, right? What is your annual rate of risk, right? Let's talk about the most obvious one, right? Which is obviously your passing, right? The odds of you dying any given year are about 1.5%, right? For some of you, it's higher, right? If you're in your 40s, 50s, or 60s, the odds of you dying in the next 12 months are greater than 2 or 3%, right? If you're younger like myself, your odds are probably less than 1.5%. Maybe for me, it's 1%. I don't know. It depends on your health conditions and everything else, right? But my point is, you have some sort of intangible risk any given year that you're going to pass. And what are the odds that your family is going to lose that Bitcoin if you pass? Maybe you've gone over some little cute treasure map with your family. Maybe you've done all those things, right? Whatever. But what are the odds you're going to lose it? If there's a 20% chance, a mere 20% chance they're going to lose your Bitcoin, and if there was merely a 2% chance that you're going to pass, you can quantify this in terms of dollars, right? Take your total Bitcoin stack, right? Maybe you have 10 Bitcoin, and maybe that means you have $1 million worth of Bitcoin. What is 20% of $1 million? The cost of that is $200,000, right? And then what is the odds of 2%? Let's say there's a 2% chance that you die in the next year, right? That means that over the next year, you're going to be paying $4,000 at current Bitcoin prices just for the odds of your family losing it of 20% plus the odds of you passing on, right? This is $4,000 at current Bitcoin prices. If Bitcoin price doubles to $200,000, this whole risk you can ignore, but you are ignoring it at your own detriment. You ignoring this is going to cost you $8,000 in the next year alone, right? Let's say a year from now, you haven't done this, you've procrastinated on it. Now the odds of you dying in any given year are 3% because you're 1 year older, you have some health condition come up or whatever. And let's say that your family just doesn't care about Bitcoin at all, and the odds of them losing the Bitcoin are 50-50, right? My point is then this cost would be even higher, looking at 20K, you're looking at 30K. My point is that you don't get to own base layer real estate in Manhattan and go from the 1650s to the 1930s, from zero steel buildings, zero buildings over 2 stories before the first hotel. The first hotel in modern New York City at the time, New Amsterdam, the first hotel wasn't until the 1640s. You are in Bitcoin right now, and you can literally count the number of hotels and what will eventually become downtown Manhattan on your hand. You don't get to magically hold land from that period of time to the time of the Empire State Building with some kind of cost. And the reality of this that none of us want to admit, but we're all going to die, right? On a long enough time horizon, there is a 100% odds that we are going to die. And there is some percentage that your family loses it, right? Now, this is all assuming you don't lose the Bitcoin within your lifetime, okay? Keeping in mind that there's a 1% chance in any given year, you're going to lose some critical single point of failure key component of your Bitcoin custody. All of a sudden, you realize that if you have 10 Bitcoin, you're probably not going to end up with your kids or your beneficiaries have 10 Bitcoin, just with the custody concerns alone. Maybe if you were to quantify all the risk, maybe they'll end up with 7 Bitcoin. Maybe they'll end up with 8 Bitcoin, right? They'll still be set. They'll still be fine, right? At that time, Bitcoin's maybe $10 million. But if you're neglecting this, if you are not taking this extremely seriously, and let's say you lose a mere 2 Bitcoin, only 20% of your Bitcoin stack, that is a mistake. Right now, you can bet on costing you $20 million when Bitcoin's 10 billion bucks, right? The most expensive single mistake you can make is neglecting this. This is my big encouragement, because most people in Bitcoin are not thinking this way. They're not comprehending these things, right? We assume, oh, since no nation state has adopted Bitcoin, has ever adopted Bitcoin, and because they think the odds of any one nation state adopting Bitcoin are low, they're just going to completely negate the fact that if you combine those, it's actually a much higher percentage you perceive. It's the same thing when it comes to the negative side or the pessimistic side of this. That's your big first concern, is the custody risk. Now, there's a second risk here, which is that of taxes. Estate taxes are 40%. So take everything I was just saying with this custody question. Let's say you have 10 Bitcoin. Let's say they end up with 8 Bitcoin, right? Because we're assuming there's a 20% chance. We'll assume there's a 20% chance they lose the Bitcoin. That means that on a risk-adjusted basis, they're going to end up with 8 Bitcoin. Oh, by the way, there's a 40% tax as well, not on the 8 Bitcoin, but on the 10 Bitcoin. So subtract another 4 Bitcoin. Pretty soon, by the time you factor in the odds of you losing Bitcoin over the course of the rest of your life, by the time you factor in the odds of your wife and children losing the Bitcoin, and by the time you factor in that the estate is going to take 40%, you're going to be donating 40% of your Bitcoin stack to the state. That means that if you have 10 Bitcoin, probably your kids are going to end up with only 4 Bitcoin. Now, again, granted, when Bitcoin's 10 million bucks, they're not going to care. They're going to be rich. They're going to be happy. They're going to be set for life or whatever. But that is still a monumental, massive oversight of risk management. You are losing over half of your Bitcoin just for those three factors alone. You losing some of your Bitcoin over the next couple of decades, your kids losing some percentage of the Bitcoin when they find it, and then the 40% estate tax, right? If you're losing 6 Bitcoin in the long-term future, when Bitcoin's 10 million bucks a pop, that's a $60 million mistake. I am begging you not to make. People say, oh, I'll only upgrade to multi-sig when there's enough Bitcoin for it to make sense to me. My encouragement is this is a multi-deca million-dollar mistake in the long-term future if your time horizon is long enough and if you are equating the risks of these things long enough. I'm being as conservative as I can here. If we're honest, there's probably a greater than a 1% chance that you're going to lose your Bitcoin in your lifetime, right? If we're honest here, your family probably doesn't have 80% odds of successfully retrieving all the Bitcoin, right? And if we're honest here, like estate taxes could be significantly higher. I hope that the government in the future reduces this down, ideally to eventually 0%, but there's no guarantee. Maybe they raise it to 50% or 60% or 70% or 80%, right? There's no guarantee. There's only probabilities. This does not include capital gains taxes. This does not include all the current taxes. And so my strong encouragement would be consider different kinds of trusts. Consider IRAs. Consider irrevocable trusts, right? Consider different ways of avoiding taxes and getting private placement life insurance, doing whatever possible to avoid these taxes. You can fully avoid the estate taxes today. You can fully avoid capital gains taxes today by not selling. You can minimize your taxes as much as possible today to end up with the highest Bitcoin stack possible. And the third risk, which I think you probably really need to keep in mind, which is one that, is one that a lot of people aren't keeping in mind yet. It's a small chance right now, yet the chance is growing. Once your net worth is over a few million bucks, right? Let's say $3 million to $5 million. This is personally where I see these things start to emerge. When we're talking about multi-million-dollar net worth, the lawsuit sharks and the parasites really emerge and they start coming after you. They will nickel and dime you forever. Oh, we think that Billy has $5 million worth of Bitcoin. Why on earth are we going to sue somebody that has $5 million of equity in a complicated real estate portfolio in 7 different states under 6 different LLCs? Let's just go after the idiot that didn't have any kind of legal protection for his Bitcoin, that's got it all memorized in his head or held in his house, right? Let's go after him. Let's say he said something racist, or he stepped on my foot, or he ran over my mailbox, or let's just make something up. Let's go after him. Let's sue him for $500,000. Maybe he'll fight us, maybe he won't, but it's probably a small enough amount. He'll just let it go, right? My point is, their lawyer is $2,000 an hour. Your legal protection is nothing because you literally didn't think about this, and they're going to get that money. Okay, I've seen this happen to multiple people in my work at the Bitcoin Advisor that were eventually became clients because they realized the importance of having lawsuit and lawfare mitigation built into the Bitcoin estate protocol, right? It's like, you don't get to just magically waltz into having $50 million of net worth without somebody trying to come after you, make your life inconvenient. They know they can't take it via a quantum computer. They know they can't take it via physical force, or at least they don't want to because they don't want to go to jail. They want to be fully within the law. They're going to leverage the courts against you to do everything they can to try to take your Bitcoin, or at least get you to part with some of your Bitcoin, right? You don't want to deal with this. I'm telling you, it's a headache. I've never gone through this personally, but I'm protected against this, and I've helped other people protect themselves against this. And it is not very fun to watch this happen because it's so stupid. It's so ridiculous. And so maybe right now you think, oh, this doesn't apply to me because my net worth is not $3 million. But let's say you have 5 Bitcoin. That means that your net worth is $500,000. Again, you should be excited about Bitcoin price going up. You should be excited about all these positive catalysts for your Bitcoin stack. But what happens if we actually hit $1 million for every Bitcoin next year? All of a sudden, you're going to go from $500,000 in net worth, you're going to go to $5 million in net worth, basically overnight in the span of a lifetime, right? If we were to actually have a 10x in Bitcoin price, I think that is the max pain scenario. And that is what terrifies me, that it actually could be correct. Bitcoin going up in price by a factor of 10 is max pain for all the corporations that didn't adopt it. Bitcoin going up by a factor of 10 is max pain for all the nation states that were adopting it as the national strategic reserve. And all the Bitcoiners, max pain is price going up. Your salaries and incomes collapse in terms of Bitcoin because you're earning in terms of dollars, and you weren't prepared for a 10x in net worth. You're mentally prepared for doubling or tripling your net worth. You're not prepared for a 5x, a 10x, or let alone a 20x in your personal net worth. And so even if that 20x in your personal net worth from right now takes 5 years to unfold, you probably still aren't prepared for it. So again and again and again, my encouragement is seriously start to prepare now against lawsuits and lawfare against you. Seriously start to minimize your taxes now, okay? If you were to maximize the value of an irrevocable trust. If you're to maximize your tax benefits in the future, 20 or 30 years from now, you have to start setting up those things today. You don't get to just magically start from square one when your net worth is already $10 million. The best time to take action is today. And likewise, it is so important with your Bitcoin custody. We do not know when we're going to die, but we're all going to die. We do not know how good your family's estate planning and recovery of your Bitcoin is. But my point is, you have to start thinking in terms of probabilities. When it comes to quantum computers, right, nothing is absolute. When it comes to which company is going to adopt it, nothing is absolute. When it comes to the game theory nation states, nothing is absolute. We do not know the future when it comes to those positive catalysts and these negative catalysts. So please feel free to text me. That's my phone number right there. Information and link in the description below. Please text me your name and email. I'll be more than happy to get back to you. Please email me. There's my email address on the screen right there. Advisor with an ER, right? You can, make sure to use the E, not an O, right? A lot of people get that wrong. Or you can book a call with me directly. Information in the description below. If you don't want to have a virtual meeting or a virtual call and you want to come to an in-person event, I highly recommend those. They're a lot of fun. I just did one in El Salvador a couple of weeks ago. It was a fantastic time. I'm co-hosting an event in Colombia in January of 2025. If you want to go to that, text me. We're selling the final tickets to that right now. It's a very small group, very intimate group, but it's going to be a lot of fun. You can go to Zion National Park with me in May of 2025. That is immediately after the Bitcoin Magazine Vegas conference. That's going to be a really fun time. There are already a dozen people or so that have committed to going to that. It's going to be a wonderful time. We have one of the best 50 resorts in the entire world, ranked by National Geographic. A beautiful place, private chef, all, we spare no expense, right? It's a beautiful, wonderful place. There's a private island that we're renting in October of 2025 in New Hampshire. If you want to join us there, that's going to be 100 people. Some amazing speakers are going there. James Lavish, Larry Lepard, Mark Moss, and a bunch of other speakers I can't even announce yet. And then, of course, El Salvador Bitcoin Bootcamp in November 2025. That's going to be a wonderful time, too. So please start acting like your Bitcoin is going to 10x in price over the next couple of years. Because if you have a third of a Bitcoin, it is time to start thinking about this. If you have 3 Bitcoin, the time to start taking action was a year ago, right? And if you are somebody that has 5 Bitcoin, if you have 15 Bitcoin, if you have 50 Bitcoin or more, right? If you or 50 Bitcoin, like you have to start immediately. You have to start immediately protecting it against these things because the catalysts are here. Everybody is wrong. Max pain, Bitcoin price is going to skyrocket. People that don't take this step seriously are going to get burnt. I don't care if you use me to help you. I don't care if you have someone else help you. My point is either you're going to take this stuff seriously on your own right now, or you're going to hire somebody like myself to help you take it seriously right now, or you're going to lose it. There is no third option. If you don't take this stuff seriously, either yourself by investing 1,000 hours or by hiring somebody to help you expedite your learning, then you're going to lose your Bitcoin. There is no other option. So use the information on the screen, book a call with me, or we can talk digitally or come in person. It's going to be a little more expensive for you actually paying, to go out there, but it's going to be a wonderful time. Really solid events, really solid speakers, going to be a great time. So my lasting encouragement here. You do not get to have a 100x in purchasing power without becoming a 100x larger target. I, Luke Royals, am a massive hyper bull when it comes to Bitcoin. I think Bitcoin is not going to stop at $1 million a coin. I think it's going to 10 million bucks a coin. I think it's going to dramatically skyrocket. And because I believe that's the case, that's why I'm so paranoid with keeping Bitcoin secure, with protecting Bitcoin. And my loving, respectful opinion is that most people are not correct when it comes to Bitcoin. Most people are wrong when it comes to Bitcoin. Bitcoin is going way higher than you expect. Bitcoin is going way higher than everyone that doesn't have that people that don't have Bitcoin is going way higher than what they expect. And even the people that have Bitcoin are not bullish enough. You think Bitcoin's going to double or triple or quadruple, but you haven't considered what happens if actually this thing were to 10x. What happens if actually this thing were to quintuple over the course of the next year, right? What would actually happen if that were the case? What are the main threats that would be waged against you? Please keep these things in mind because the future is very bright. It's very optimistic. You're going to be able to retire on Bitcoin. You're going to be way wealthier than you can possibly imagine than you've ever been in your entire life. And you have to take it seriously. You have to protect it. Buy more Bitcoin, take it seriously, take self-custody, protect against taxes, protect against single points of failure when it comes to your custody, and single points of failure when it comes to your legal situation. Do all these things, reach out to me in the comments below or in the link in the description. Feel free to reach out. But again and again and again, my encouragement is you are front-running the nation states. You are front-running the major corporations. We don't know which corporation, which nation state, or which billionaire is going to buy next, but we know if one of them does it, they're all going to do it. And so you have the opportunity right now to do it. Take it seriously, reach out, and we'll see what the next news catalyst is. And I'm sure in a couple weeks, this whole video is going to be outdated. We're going to have a whole another set of new news updates to share. Thank you for watching. Please like, comment, subscribe, do all the wonderful things. I put a lot of heart and soul and effort into these, and would appreciate your feedback. Thanks.